I'm really happy that you guys are all joining us today because you guys have different experience levels. We have a couple of beginners. We have a couple of people that are first year, second year, third year, fourth year, 7-year beekeepers. Just got a lot of variety here. And what we're going to talk about today is for the new beekeepers, what you would give as words of encouragement, hopefully, about beekeeping and what it's all about. And then we'll talk a little bit about goal setting and expanding your hive yards, your apiaries, and maybe even getting into queen rearing. So if you guys would like to get started, I'm going to focus on Joanna first, only because she is a brand new beekeeper. And I want you guys to actually speak to her when we're talking about starting as a beginner beekeeper. She came to one of our classes last fall and she is totally hooked, I think. And Joanna, you can take yourself off mute if you want. And we've been talking a little bit. She's trying to decide. So what does she start with? Does she start with a package? Does she start with a nuke? You know, like these are questions that you guys all had when you first started. Does she do regular hives? Does she do Age hives? Does she do a Waré hive? Does she do top bar hives? There's so many questions. Then what does she do? Does she use plastic? Does she use wax? Does she use wood? Where does she put her bees? There's a whole bunch of things that we start in when we do beginner classes, but just like a couple of sentences from each of you. I'm just going to go through this really quick. And so I'm going to put your name out there. And then if you can give me just one sentence even of what you would encourage a beekeeper to do in their first year, that would be great. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Karen. Karen, what would you do if you were encouraging somebody to become a new beekeeper? What would you say?
Don't give up. Don't ever give up. Hang in there.
Yep. Yep. Derek.
I would start with one nuke and one package and see how they do, see how it makes out. And it was a real learning experience for me this year. This is my first year, to see the difference between how those got started. That's what I'd do.
Mm-hmm. Francie, what about you?
Have patience.
Mm-hmm.
And always observe.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Nancy, what do you think? What would you do? You didn't even want to be a beekeeper, did you?
No, but I am now.
You're all in.
I'm all in, and I think my my first biggest piece of advice is to get more than one hive. Start with more than one hive. One is not enough.
Mm-hmm. And not because she likes a lot of hives, but what reason would you start with more than one hive, Nance?
As Derek said, you're able to see the difference. Whether you're starting with a package and a nuke or two packages or two nukes is irrelevant to my comment. But as Derek said, you can see the differences between the hives, regardless of their original source. You also, and more importantly, you have the opportunity to share resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one thing, Joanna, that's one of the things that we've all learned too, is like if you have Waré hives and top bar hives and Langstroth hives and Age hives, it's really hard to try to exchange things in those hives because you don't have the frames. You have the bees and you can shake the bees, but there's a lot to that part of it too. So there's a lot that you're going to learn along the way. Okay, thank you, Nancy. Evelyn, what did you start?
Can I ask a question about that?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joanna.
So is 2 enough, or do you recommend 3?
Ask Greg.
Yeah.
I would say 36 is too many. I would start with 2 or 3. I would not go past 3 my first year. 2 or 3 would be a nice number to start with.
Yeah, I often say in your first year, 2 is good. The next years after that, maybe 3 and a nuke. That's not over manageable. Going higher than that in your first couple of years, it's a lot to keep up with. And you'll talk with a few more beekeepers here that have gotten to that point. So I think 2 is where you want to, because you never know, you could go from 2 to 4 very easily in your first year. Definitely. And Evelyn, did you start with Langstroth or did you start with the Age hives?
I started with Langstroth, and I live in a high wind area and knew there was a better way. So I moved to the Age. Mm-hmm. I have both. And hopefully this year, well, I'm already working on the plan to use the Age frames in my queen rearing, so that it's easier to move them back and forth.
Yeah, Yeah. Okay, great. Great. Okay, Brian, what would you give for suggestions?
Set aside time and be very patient. It's a good learning experience. You'll see them develop throughout the course of the year. You'll notice different things in different months as you go along. Look and learn, take your time going through the hives, going through the different frames and seeing what's going on in the brood area where they're actually making the honey and things like that. Just take your time, set aside, don't rush through it, enjoy it. Actually, it's
Mhm.
very peaceful and relaxing to be out there, very quiet, and just going through one frame at a time and looking at seeing what's going on, looking for problems or just enjoying what you're seeing.
Mhm. I really feel like it is a Zen experience for me, even though I have quite a few hives. I look forward to it because it releases a lot of your tension because you're focusing on just the bees and you're not thinking about all the other things that are going on in your life right at that moment. So that's one of the things that I get out of beekeeping as well. So that would be my encouragement, is to just, like Brian said, enjoy it. Don't be intimidated, and build your confidence so that you really enjoy the experience. It shouldn't be something where you go in and you're all scared every time that you go in. There may be things that happen, but those shouldn't be happening all the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jody.
Yes, Brian.
This year, I actually managed to convince one of my grandsons to come with me. I have extra suits and I have an extra pair of gloves. And we opened up one of the hives. We actually found the queen. I pointed out to him the different bees in there. Pulled out different frames and showed him what was going on in each different one. And he thought it was totally fascinating.
Yeah. Kids do think it's great. I have a little grandson who's 7 years old, and I have a little kid suit for him as well. And every time we go in, I make sure that he finds the queen, and he thinks that that is just the cat's meow. He just thinks that he is just the beekeeper. He loves the smoker. I have to be careful because he loves the smoker. But he's a really good kid. So I'm hoping that he's going to be my protege at some point. I have a couple of them in mind, so I'm hoping that they'll all take that path a little bit too. But kids are a great way to go into beehives too, and you'll be surprised how much you know when you share it with others and with children. So, okay, Beth and Joe.
This is our second year and our bees did not make it. They left us late last fall. I guess my biggest piece of advice would be to avoid plastic frames. I have yet to get bees to go into a super with plastic frames.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
just don't like it.
Yeah.
And I've tried waxing them, and that doesn't seem to help at all.
Yeah. And some people love plastic frames. So, it's just personal experience. I personally like wax myself as well. So, but yeah, we all should learn from experience because it may work better for some people than it does for others. Who knows? Okay, Peter.
I'll give you my top 5. So first off, don't overthink it. Keep it simple. Don't get too spun up on things. Don't get too spun up on Facebook and what's going on. Don't overthink it. Two hives. I totally agree. I started with one, then I got a second one kind of pretty early on, and I was pretty happy I had two. It's great to be able to compare what's going on between two of them. And if you can, this is something that I've learned as I've, 4 years into it, source locally. I do everything you can to avoid packages from Georgia or California. 3, find a bee friend. I was super lucky to have a very knowledgeable and experienced mentor, obviously, and Jody with classes and stuff. So, but find a friend, stick with that friend, and learn from that individual. 4, pick a path. You're going to get all kinds of information from different people. You're going to read things on Facebook. Pick your path, stick with it. Don't be middle of summer and then deviate from your plan because you had a plan in place. You had a path, unless it's critical, like you've got something crazy going on. But pick a path, stick with it. And then lastly, you have mites. You have them. Put a treatment plan in place and stick with it. Do it, and hopefully you'll be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are all really good advice because people do overthink things and they think they have to be perfect. And beekeeping is not a perfect world. There's so many challenges and obstacles that you may face, you just don't know. And we haven't even talked about bears and fences and all the other things that can accumulate with you know, with time or as you go along. So yeah, so you just have to, and what Peter said about following a path, I encourage people to listen to one person at a time. And don't listen to 5 different people, because they're all going to put you in all different directions, because that's what we are as beekeepers. We're thinkers, and we think, not everybody, but a lot of people think that their way is the only way, but it's not. There's a lot of other ways to do things, but try to stay on that path. Thank you very much, Peter. You know, you have to listen to everybody, but you have to make your choice in the end. And again, trying to stay on a path is usually a good idea. Doesn't mean you can't listen to everybody. You want to, because you want to make sure that you have all of the information that you can to make good choices. So yeah. Okay, Greg, what would you give for encouragement?
Your bees are going to die. That does not mean you failed.
Exactly.
And the other thing I would say is observe their life and question why. So they're going to do a lot of different things through the year. They're going to draw out a frame on one side versus the other, that kind of thing. Why are they doing that? Understand why they're doing that. That will help you better manage them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you know, there's all kinds of information out there, but until you really try it for yourself, you know, for me, I'm just not one of these people that believes everything I see or read or whatever, especially on YouTube, because you've got a lot of first year experts on YouTube that they're just excited to share their experience, but try to find somebody that really does know what they're talking about. I think there's the Fat Bee Man, I think, or there's a couple of guys from Canada. There's some really good stuff to watch, but just don't believe everything that you see on YouTube or that you hear. Yeah. Okay, Dale, I think I left you for the last one, I guess.
I don't know what to make of that.
I know.
My biggest recommendation, I think it's hard because it's the second year now, would be buy more equipment than you think you need. There are resources available around if you happen to run short on short notice, but it's a little easier just to have it. Mm-hmm. Without getting into, possible transmission of things. Because I ran real short my first year. So
how many hives did you have in your first year, Dale? How did you start?
First year I did 2. I kind of wished I had 3, but now I would be way in over my head. So I think 2 is a good place to start. With the theory being with 3, you could see what seems to be normal and which one's different. Mm-hmm. Is the theory there? But because my whole first year I thought, oh, I wish I had 3. But yeah, I started with 2 and that turned into 7. So, well, because I planned on them dying and they didn't. So you have to plan for success as well as failure, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, Dale, were you going to start your first year? How did you get started in bees?
I was not. I was going to learn my first year because I was under the impression I wasn't going to be able to get bees. But I was able to get bees, and I was convinced to get bees because it was a good idea.
Yeah. There's no time like the present.
Yeah. So I struggled to come up with what I needed, but I got it done, and I'm glad I did because I'd be way behind now. So
right. So now you've got 2 years of experience, and you're so much further ahead than you would be with just 1 year of experience.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So Joanna, you've heard all of these comments. What are you thinking now?
Oh, well, I'm still very excited. It's something I've wanted to do for years, and I've got, my yard areas already. I've had a vision. I got a fence I'm putting up. Ready to order the bees and go. I'm going to go with the two sets of bees like we had talked about.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I found, your class and this group because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm ready to go. When I jump into something, I jump into it. So I'm very eager.
Yeah. And that's kind of what you have to do with beekeeping. You have to be ready to learn. and you have to be open to doing some reading and doing some research and planning ahead. Like Dale said, when you don't plan ahead and you don't have equipment, what happens if you have a swarm? You need to have a box or they are going to go off and you're losing, that could be $150 or more flying away. If you
You need
lose
to have a
swarm.
guild.
Yes, you do need a guild. So let's talk about that just a little bit. So over in the Guilford Brattleboro area, there is a guild called the Brattleboro Area Beekeepers Guild. And that was started really for the purpose of having support without having to have the political parts of having a bee club. It's a bunch of people that are caring and are there for each other. So Nancy, tell us a little bit more about what a guild could be made of.
Well, I have to say the idea of having a guild was Jody's, because Jody had a significant presence over here in the Brattleboro and Guilford area because she was teaching and giving workshops, and she sort of withdrew back to the greater Keene area, which sort of left a void over here. And she sort of dubbed me the keeper of her presence here. And it was her idea to create a guild, which is sort of patterned after an old agricultural guild where farmers in a community would help each other. And a sheep farmer would help build the barn for the cow farmer, and the horseshoe person would shoe the horses in exchange for something else. But basically it's an agricultural group of like-minded people who want to help each other within their own silos of expertise. So again, I have to credit Jody. It was entirely her idea. And I picked up the mantle and sort of keep it going. We do have a Facebook group, which you're welcome to join, Joanna, where we just help each other. And it's sort of a no judgment, no criticism group of people who exist just to support each other as beekeepers. Mm-hmm. And I have a big barn with a lot of extra space and a lot of extra equipment that's been, a lot of it's been donated or provided at extremely low cost by people who have left the area or left beekeeping. A lot of extra equipment belonged to Jody, and I clean it up and I make it available to people in case they need it. And as Dale said, sometimes you need something and you need it now. Mm-hmm. And as Jody said, what do you do when you have a swarm? If you don't have that extra piece of equipment, I usually have 5 or 6 wooden nuke boxes on hand. And if you were to call me and say, oh my gosh, I've got a swarm, I need to catch it now, I've got a nuke box for you. If you need to put a feeder box on, I have extra feeder boxes. I have extras of everything. And ideally, this would be more diversified than just coming to me. We'd come to each other. But that's what we're working toward, is coming to each other and not just me. In situations where you don't have what you need. If you need an extra set of hands, if you need anything related to beekeeping, ask the guild, put it out there, and more often than not, you'll get help.
Yeah. And we've offered workshops, so in the summer when we have time, we'll go out to a yard for somebody and we'll just do a visit. And that's where you learn the most, I think, is when you get into the hives with each other. Whenever you have anybody that asks or says, I'm going into my hive today, please do say, can I join you? Can I just watch? Because sometimes people don't need any help, but it's always good to have somebody that is willing to open up their hive and to share some of their knowledge with you. So that's one of the things that I encourage with all of you guys as well. So, it doesn't matter if it is in Massachusetts, if it's in Fitzwilliam, if it's in Swanzey, if it's in Westmoreland or Chesterfield or Alstead. I'm trying to think of all of you guys, Westmoreland, Peterborough, Ohio, or anywhere that you are. Share your knowledge with other people and make it something that you can enjoy. Because the other thing that I find is that people don't even realize who the beekeepers are just around the corner from them. And so that's one of the great things about sharing in all of these Zooms or Facebook or whatever, is that you get to know other people that are there for you when you need the help. So I just think that that's really, really important as a brand new beekeeper to know that there is support there. When I started as a beekeeper, I started at Stonewall Farm and I took a free class because I worked there. And so they supported the staff with classes if we wanted to take them. I never, ever, ever would have thought that I would have enjoyed beekeeping as much as I do. So it's just knowing where to start and having that support group. I think that's what really, really helps you out. Okay, do we have any other suggestions or anything about becoming a new beekeeper? Do you guys understand what the difference is between a package and a nuke? Okay, so I'm just going to mention it for anybody that doesn't. So a package of bees comes usually in some kind of a box like this. You can see that it's got a screen and it comes with a queen that's just been introduced. A nuke of bees is a nucleus of a hive, and that is usually on deep frames. You get 5 frames of a queen that's already been laying eggs, brood. That means that things that are capped over, like a chicken egg kind of capped over. You get honey, you get nectar, you get space for them to grow, and that's what a nuke of bees is. So that's already established. But from what I've seen, and I'm sure you guys have seen the same thing, by the end of the season, they balance out. It's just that when you start as a brand new beekeeper, there's a lot of work that they have to do. So it's like moving into a brand new house that's unfurnished. They have to do everything. They have to draw out all the comb before they can even start to, you know, have the queen start laying eggs. She will start laying eggs really fast because that's what she needs to do. But they need to draw out the comb. They need to bring in food. They need to have enough bees. There's a lot of things that they need to get started. Okay. Anybody else for any comments on getting started?
I guess
Can I ask
the
a
only
question?
other comment, Jody, is
Yep, Peter.
Is the difference between a nuke and the package is the fact that the nuke is already, the queen's already established.
Mhm.
I mean, like that's the biggest difference in that package is like she's been kind of thrown in there and she
Yeah.
might not work.
And you also have those 5 frames. So if it's cold, when you get your bees actually have a place to get together and keep the cluster warm. They can't keep a cluster warm when they're just hanging out so easily. But when they have frames that are drawn foundation, they can stick their heads in and they kind of make it like a furnace. So that's one of the reasons that having even a couple of frames drawn is a positive thing. What would you think, Peter?
Totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, I mean, like I said, I started off with one of each, but it just seems like, you know, if you want to keep local and enhance your success in that first year, you're going to have probably better luck with a nuke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
It'll
Jody,
take
I've
a little
never,
longer to get it.
If you bought a nuke and you bought a package, you can always take a frame or 2 from the nuke, shake the bees off, and put that in with the package bees, and now they've got a frame or 2. So that's all they need. They need drawn comb is what they need. They will get along fine because those bees have never been introduced to each other, so they're not going to fight. So it's just a
Yeah.
thought. Brian, you had something to say?
Yeah, I've never used the nuke. I've always had packages. And one of the things I liked about it is to be able to watch them develop throughout the course of the year.
Yeah.
You know, because you're starting from ground zero. And obviously I don't always have, you know, just bare wax where they have to start drawing it out. I have a lot of frames left over where it's, you know, is drawn out and they can get started. It gives them a head start, which is nice. But it's still, to me, fascinating, you know, dumping the bees into the box and watching them develop and, you know, checking it every week or so to see that the, you know, the queen is laying and just watching the development. I just think, you know, even though I've been doing this for a few years now, it's still fascinating to see them just develop throughout the course of the several weeks.
Yeah. I often feel like a midwife when all the bees, the packages and the nukes are arriving, because you put the bees into the hives and then within a couple of days you can see such a new change, you know, like it is like an organism just giving birth, because all of a sudden you see those tiny little eggs. And don't you guys get excited about that when you see that on a new hive? Like everything is getting started. It's very. And so money can be an issue too, because, you know, I thought when my second year, I thought, oh, I'm going to buy 6 packages, but nobody ever told me that I could split my bees and have more bees without spending money on 6 packages. I could buy 2 packages and do some splits or whatever. So there's ways that you can do things that aren't as expensive as well, because beekeeping is not something that you just go into and it's a one-time expense. As you guys probably will agree, there's always something that you need, isn't there?
Well, Jody, I was told in the beginning that most beekeepers are very frugal people.
We are.
I have not found that to be the case.
Until it comes to their bees and equipment for their bees, then it's, oh, take my money.
It is amazing. It really is. But, you know, I think that we have this connection with our bees. It's almost like they're our kids. And so we want to send them to college. You know, we want the best for our kids. And sometimes this is what we have to do is it's a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit here. And then all of a sudden you've spent $1,000. Yeah. Okay. So that's about getting started and what to expect in your first year, Joanna. Now we're going to start talking a little bit about goal setting and expansion. So every year about this time, I start looking at the catalogs. I want to see all the brand new stuff that they have in the catalogs, which isn't always very much. After doing this for a few years, you don't see a lot of brand new stuff. And then you also are questioning, oh, is that a new gadget? You know, do I really need that? That kind of thing. But
Yes.
goal setting for the next season is really good at this time of the year because you need to decide, do I need to order a package of bees as a backup? Just in case I lose all my bees, which doesn't usually happen. But if in case I lose all my bees, what am I going to do? Am I willing to go through the next season without bees and have to face the fact that maybe I won't be able to get bees in the spring? I always like to plan ahead. I like to be proactive. I like to make sure that what I want to do is going to happen. It may not be exactly what I think is going to happen, but at least I have the possibilities. So this is a good time, just as a reminder, in December to start thinking about purchasing bees if you are going to purchase bees. There's several places that you can order bees from. Just make sure that you read up, find what you want, find out, are they packages or nukes, know what you're buying. It's just a lot of things that are out there for you to kind of decide. Now, the next thing is, am I going to stay with the kinds of hives that I have? So Evelyn and I and Nancy soon will we all have Auger hives. So most of us start with Langstroth. Some people start with top bar hives or Warray hives. But we need to decide, like, what do we want to do this year? Do we want to raise queens? Do we want more hives? You know, like now, if anybody needs equipment, Greg's got a bunch of equipment I'm sure that he could get you started with. But, you know, like these are kinds of things that, you know, like a beginner beekeeper might not have the money to get started. You can get started very frugally, but you need to get started in order to get there. So goal setting, how many hives do you want to get going over this 2021 season? Peter, I'm going to pick on you just because you had mentioned this in one of the other Zooms that we had. You want to do some expanding. So tell me, what are your goals for this year?
So I'm going into winter with 6 colonies, 4 full-size hives, 2 nukes. I run all medium equipment, including my nukes. And, you know, my personal life changed a little bit this past summer. I actually retired from my full-time career and now going into an independent consulting business. So I have more time now. I didn't have the time to be, 6 was about what I could handle before, but I think I'd like to double my my number of colonies next year, get up into the 10 to 12 range and potentially overwinter a bunch of new nukes. So I've got to figure out what my strategy is for expansion this year. And I'm, you know, queen rearing is one of the things I want to do. I got to figure out how I do that, whether I get, you know, like a mating, you know, a mating nuke where I can raise 3 queens at a time. And just, it's another avenue for me that I haven't done in the past 4 years of having queens on hand, splitting hives more frequently. But I also want to be able to retain some honey production. I realize I'm not going to have as much, but I just want to be able to have some honey production because we use quite a bit of it in the house. I don't use it that much for sale. So I got to figure that out. And that's one of my plans for this winter is how do I raise queens and how do I expand?
Yeah. So you've got a lot of choices there because there's a lot of different equipments that are available. You've got the mini queen rearing nukes. You've got the 3-way nukes. You've got the 2-way nukes. You've got, let's see, 3. I think there's even a 4-way nuke that one of the other companies has. And those are usually on deep frames. So
right.
so that's another thing, like, okay, now you're bringing in another kind of equipment. Are you willing to have this kind of stuff? Or do you want to build your own and do them all on mediums and do, queenering that way? There's a lot of questions that you have, and you'll get there, but you just need to decide how far are you willing to go and how many different kinds of equipment do you want to have? So for
Yeah,
me,
I'm pretty,
because I have a lot of different people that I'm teaching, I have them all, but that doesn't
Right.
mean that it makes it any easier. It does make it easy when I need to find a queen, because I can always find a queen. But if it means exchanging frames from one hive to another, you need to try to make sure that you have some consistency there.
yeah, that's been one of my philosophies. I mean, I think that it kind of came up earlier, is one of my philosophies is like, sometimes it's not work harder, it's work smarter. And that's one of my principles is I want to stay all mediums.
Right.
And so I've been digging through, and I've found some mating nukes that are mediums. I think there's one out there that I can find.
Yeah, and they are available. You just have to ask, because
And
for people that like, I will sell some nukes, but I need to know, do you need them on deep frames or do you need them on mediums? And medium frames are not something that you usually will get a nuke of bees in, so you do have to ask. Yeah. So Peter, how do you think you're going to get there? Are you going to just split your bees? Are you going to buy new queens? What are you going to do to get to where you want to be?
I think it's going to be a combination. I think I'm going to split some. I mean, part of it is the age of my queens that I have in my current colonies. So I'm at the point now where I've got some queens that have gone through their second summer, so they're going to get pulled this summer, this coming summer. If they make it through the winter, they're going to get pulled anyways. So I'm going to be able to split some of those. I'm probably going to get a couple new queens to be able to increase my genetics and just kind of have some diversity there. And then you did bring up a good point of like, what happens if you lose all your hives? So there's part of me that says, do I hedge and just like buy one nuke from somebody just to have just in case? I mean, percentage wise, I don't think I'll lose all 6 colonies, but it can happen.
Right. So, but you have friends. So
I have friends.
If we have friends that are beekeepers, as I mentioned, I think in a previous Zoom, I think, I had a really nice person offer to split some bees for me last spring when I had lost almost all of my bees. And what I did is I went and I purchased brand new frames, brand new foundation. I even wired every single frame in 6 or 8 nuke boxes. And I went up and we split her hives. I didn't take the queens. I took 5 frames out of each of the hives that we were looking at. And that was actually good for her because she wanted to replace it and put some brand new frames in. And so she had brand new frames going into a hive, which is good. So the the bees all had something to work on. And I was able to walk away with bees as well. Both of us were happy. And this is why it's really important to know other beekeepers, because even if you're not going to buy bees, if you know somebody that you have a good chance, like to have even 2 or 3 friends that are beekeepers, somebody's going to come through the winter. You don't have to buy bees, but when you're first getting started, it's kind of important. Nancy was talking about the guild. There's several people that are in the guild, and I'm sure that you can find a few people that have bees if that's how you want to get started, or if they're willing to do that. So I wanted to talk with Nancy just a little bit more too. Nancy, you have gone from 2 hives to a few more, and then gone down and gone up and gone down and gone up. This is by choice, not because of anything that happened, except for that you have had some bears, but that hasn't really deterred your hives. But where do you see yourself, Nancy, for this coming season?
Well, I actually started with 1 my first
Okay.
year,
Mm-hmm.
which was a mistake. And I just want to point that out to Joanna. And when you're making it, I think everyone's echoed the sentiment that 1 is too few. 1's not enough. Whether you start with 2 or 3 or 36, 1's not enough. I did start with
We love
1.
you, Greg.
And 1 wasn't enough. So I did bounce around. I think I've been beekeeping for 7 or 8 years, and I've bounced around, but it's kind of like the stock market. It goes up and down, but over time it trends up. So right now I'm taking 12 into winter, I believe, in various iterations. I do have a double nuke that I'm taking in, and I also have a long Langstroth that I built myself with a lot of help. But I'm taking that into winter as a resource hive. So I have a lot of different types of hives. I have different styles of hives. Every one has its own personality. And it's fascinating to watch them. But what my intention is, and I've always said this, what I'm doing in beekeeping is I want to make bees and I want to make beekeepers. And when I say I want to make bees, I want to split my hives. I sell off nukes in the spring. I do have a 3-section queen rearing box, and I sort of dabble in queen rearing. I also have hives that I used to make honey with, and I wholesale my honey. So I'm sort of reaching into every area of beekeeping. I also try to help and teach people. I have a lot of people who I mentor. So I'm into the teaching component, I'm into the honey component, I'm into the queen rearing component, and I'm constantly expanding what I'm doing. So as Jody mentioned earlier, this year I bought some Auger hives, and I'm hopefully going to have an Auger house built or repurpose another building. But I'm trying to also get into different styles of beekeeping as well. And another thing about the Auger hive, I'm looking at the faces here, you're all very beautiful, but we're not young people. And lifting a box filled with brood and honey, a deep box, is hard on the shoulders and elbows. And the higher you get, the harder it is. And you're using joints in ways they weren't intended to be used. And with Auger beekeeping, it's like pulling a book off a shelf. You're simply pulling the frame out in this direction, and there's no heavy lifting. So I just wanted to point that out for those of us who are aging out of beekeeping or looking at the possibility of aging out, that there are options available to us. Yeah. So what I try to do is just to keep current, to stay on top of what I'm doing, to continue to expand without overdoing things. Mm-hmm.
So are you interested in expanding your yard at all, Nancy, next year, or what is your goal for 2021?
Yeah. My goal is to expand in a way that I can keep pace with. And it's easy to lose control. It's easy to find yourself in a position where you have more than you can handle and more balls in the air than hands to throw them with. So what my plan for next year is to get my Auger hive online one way or another. And I also have an abutting piece of property that has a lot of space. It's an orchard. It's a 26 tree orchard. So it's got a lot of forage available, and to put a second yard. As I said, right now I have 12 hives in the yard that I run now, and then to put a second hive in the orchard where there's plenty of forage that will probably be a little bit bigger, but I'm not going to expand quickly. It's going to be sort of a slow expansion, and I'll start by splitting off, a half dozen hives into the new area. So I think 6 will be my limit for expansion.
I think that's a good idea. I was a beekeeper for like 10 years, and I had like 5 or 6 hives for like 10 years. And it gave me the chance to learn about bees, but not feel overwhelmed. Now I do things a little bit differently. I try not to overwhelm myself. I try to keep things in balance, and I just do what I can. And I just do things smarter. Like Peter has said, we just have to be smarter and think through how we do things. And as a backyard beekeeper, when you only have 1 or 2 hives, you may think about things just a little bit differently than if you have 10 hives or 15 hives or things like that. You just have to keep thinking about how I can do things a little bit smarter as I go along. And like Nancy said, with the Auger hives, you do pull them out. Those frames are not light. Those frames can be very heavy, filled with honey, because what can happen sometimes is, just like in a Langstroth, they may draw that frame out more than expected, and you may have the weight of like 2 frames filled with honey on 1 frame sometimes. So that's not what we want, but it doesn't mean that there's no weight to the Augers. It just means that they are easily accessible, and there isn't that heavy lifting and pressure put on our shoulders. Nancy, did you want to say something else?
No, what I was going to say is it's also a larger surface area on the Auger frames.
Yeah.
So that can also lend to the weight. But the point that you just made is that you're never lifting an entire box full of them at the same
Right.
time. You're only handling one frame at a
Right.
time.
But with that, also with the AGEs, you have nowhere to go. So you're not
Yep.
you don't have the ability to add up more boxes. If you expand and your bees are in that box and they are bursting, you've got to do something to get them out of there, or you're going to have a swarm. So there's different management tools for different things like that too. So I now have 2 AGE hives. So that for me means that not hives, but houses. I have 4 regular size AGEs in each of them, and then I have nukes in those. Anyway, long story short, it just, you have to know what your management plan is in order to make sure that you plan ahead, no matter what kind of hives that you plan to have. Greg, I'm going to pick on you, and then I'm going to pick on Dale, and then I think that's going to be about it, unless Jan has something to say today. So, Greg, what's your plan for 2021?
I'm trying a new overwintering technique this year. So I want to see how well that works. And quite honestly, I modeled it right after Aunt Nancy's Home of Wayward Bees, and cracked every box and have lifted every box, and see if more ventilation does a thing. I know what over ventilation does. I've been there. So now we're going to try a happy medium. So for 2021, it's to get 10 of these 12 through the winter. I recognize there's going to be some loss, and then just keep managing in a pace that I can do with everything else that's going on. So I've got lots of extra equipment now, but that's okay. It is what it is.
But the fact is that you have it, so that if you ever do need it, that you've got it. You know,
Right.
maybe you'll get somebody else
Right.
started in beekeeping. You never know.
Who knows? Who
Right.
knows?
Yeah, I mean,
So-
we talk about not having used equipment, but if you know the beekeeper and you know that they were a safe beekeeper and that they didn't have any problems with their bees, then in my point of view, I'm okay with that. But it's when you buy equipment on the side of the road that somebody said is free, you don't know what's going on with that equipment.
Right, right. So it's just keeping it in a sustainable level.
Right.
That's easier and more comfortable to be able to manage. That's the big,
Exactly.
you know, whatever you can do. And that's managing what you've got is my measure of success. It's not whether you've got 2 hives, 5 hives, or 50 hives. That's not the yardstick that I use. It's just
Exactly.
being able to do what you can do.
Right.
And 36 at that time was just too much.
Well,
So
you know that I've always said quality, not quantity. You know,
Right.
like you need to focus on what you can do and do what you can do well.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I'm also one of those guys that when you go into a hive and you find that there's been 8 queen cells made inside of the box, I don't always scrape them all off. I go grab 7 different nukes and I just start making queens that way.
Because
And
we're
knowing
opportunists.
Yeah, and knowing that a third of them, or at least a quarter of them, are not going to make their mating flights back. And so you just hedge your bets and just go from there.
Yeah.
So
It's free.
it's free.
Yeah. It's a
free.
gift.
Watch them do what they do.
Exactly. It's just so much fun to see what bees can actually do. I have one time, just real quick, I had one time that I had forgotten, and I had queen cells, and I missed it by a day, and I had like 5 or 6 queens walking around all over the hive. I saw queens being dumped out the front, and I was like, oh my gosh. But you know, like, it's sad to see that happen, but it's interesting when you see it as an experiment. Like, yeah, I made a mistake, but it was pretty interesting seeing what they actually really do, you know, in that kind of a case. Okay, Nancy, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Greg mentioned that he's following Auntie Nancy's protocol for overwintering, and being Auntie Nancy, that some people may not realize, the protocol there, and I'd like to ask Greg to address it, is less insulation and more ventilation. And I just wanted to point that out, and if Greg could expand upon that.
So
think it's
what I did this year is, for me starting, I do a lot of OAV is my big thing. So I start earlier in the year treating for mites, only because I want the nurse bees who are going to be ultimately raising and rearing the overwintering bees, I want them as healthy as possible. So I start off early thinking about winter. Quite honestly, July 1st is when I begin my treatments. And from there, I'll continue on all through the fall. But specifically for how Nancy had done it one year, and I just thought it was a fantastic idea. is that every box is ventilated, whether it's more than just a hole in each box. I actually prop up one end of every box and either slide in a penny or a popsicle stick or something like that. And even if it's breaking the propolis that they've sealed all the boxes up with, it's cracking every single one open. So there's a little bit of airflow through the boxes. But then I used to use bee cozies. I've sort of have gotten away from that a little bit. I ended up doing a tar paper wrap in order to stop the direct wind from flying into each one of those boxes, but still allowing for each box to be ventilated. And I went with placing on top of each hive. I took essentially it's a medium box and cut it in two. And so there's a plenum up on the top of every hive that's just empty, where hot, moist air can rise up and escape out of the box. No one box is actually compressed and closed in. I know you can take your telescoping cover and you can flip it over. Some people will do that. All well and good. I went for bigger airspace. I mean, hot, moist air is where it goes. So get it up there, get it at least away from the bees, and then move it on out. I used to run screened bottom boards all winter long, and I used to leave them open. I've gotten away from doing that because I found that to be too much ventilation. Yeah, it gets really cold.
And it's pretty windy where you are too, though.
It's pretty windy and it works well, but it made it so cold that when the queen wants to start laying in January and February, it just didn't happen. They were all focused on doing everything they needed to do. So this year will be a little interesting in that it has been such a warm fall. I'm actually quasi nervous about that. I like it when it gets cold out, and I like it when they troubadour and go into hibernation, because they need to slow down and not consume every one of their resources. This year I tried something a little differently, where I pulled all honey boxes and any frame that had a lot of honey in it out of the hive in July, and I fed them through the dearth. And then I went back and reassessed what they had for the winter. You're going to either put more frames in, but I've also got sitting down ready to go for sometime later on this winter, probably March-ish, end of February, are frames of honey just ready to go. That's just in supers or in deeps to put on them to supplement them as we go through the winter. I don't worry about December, January, February, or even the first week of March. I worry about March and April the most.
Yeah.
And so if I can get over that hurdle, then we're doing okay. But the whole ventilation thing is really what I picked up from what Nancy had done.
Yeah.
And I want to give that a whirl because it seemed like a really intelligent way of going about it.
Yeah. So what she's doing is giving a very, very tiny amount of ventilation. So that's a great thing. One thing I just wanted to show you while Greg was talking too is this is what I use as a shim at the top. It actually has let's see, 1/2 inch hardware cloth in the top, so that if I want to put feed on there, that I can put it on top of that and the bees can take it, and then I can pull this off in the spring. But this gives me some room so that there's airflow in the top. You could fill it with sugar if you need to, food, whatever you need, but it does give a little bit more ventilation too. What I found was when I was an early beekeeper, I would try to put like pollen patties on and they would get moldy. So by giving them some ventilation and some airflow up there, it doesn't allow the patties to get moldy. And this also gives them an upper entrance because it has a little hole in the front. So, but there's all kinds of different ways.
I had put a
Can I make a
foam board.
comment?
Yeah, just one minute, Jan. Yep.
One year I had taken a piece of just 2-inch styrofoam insulation and put that on top of every hive. I will not be doing that until the weather begins to fluctuate, where we get more condensation happening. That won't come on until March-ish. And the only reason that I'm holding off on that is that with every hive that I put that insulation on, it did a fantastic job of capping all the heat inside the boxes, which then also drove all the bees all the way up to the top prematurely. They left all their stores down below because they were congregating up with heat. So that's a mistake that I made, something I've learned from, and something I'm not going to do again.
Was that on the inside, Greg? Was that on the inside or the outside that you put that?
Right on top on the outside.
Outside.
Yeah, a 2x2 piece. It was actually bigger than the outer cover. So it helped water and rain and snow shed off of the hive. But there's a reason that they need to stay down on the bottom during the first half of winter and then slowly migrate up.
Right.
By creating a nice hat, everybody went up right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jan, you had something to say?
Yeah, I do what some of you have done, and that is pull every bit of honey that I can in July and store it for them to make sure that they all go into the winter and into the spring with some of their own honey. We do keep some hives outside. We have a winter box we put on top that leaves a gap space in between for sugar boards, sugar patties, pollen patties, depending on what time of the winter season it is. But the majority of our hives go into a winter bee room, which is moisture and temperature regulated. So we keep them at 38 degrees and 40% humidity. And by keeping them like that, the first winter we did it, we put them in with our normal 100 pounds of honey on every hive, and they came out with 60. I put 47 in and came out with 45. So my loss was minimal. But because they stayed clustered and didn't do all those flights and then come back hungry or break cluster and die from the cold, they didn't eat all of the honey that they normally would when they're outside. So food for thought, if anybody's even got a shed that they want to put them in or underneath a porch, to protect them more, it will help them.
Yeah. So having that wind block is great. And Jan and her husband have both been doing, this research with bringing the bees inside, but in their case, they're keeping the humidity, the carbon dioxide, they're checking on all of these things. Just really having a wind block is a great thing to just get even started with. What else was I going to say? I know a lot of people like to put them in their basements possibly, or in a shed, but what you do need to do is make sure that it's completely black, because if you don't, those bees will come out and you will find brown droppings everywhere. So that's one of the things to think about too. Thank you, Jan. And Dale, you are going to, again, be the end of this. So Dale, what are you going to do this year? And what is your plan for 2021?
What am I gonna do this year as far as winter prep?
What do you plan to do for how big of a yard do you want to have? Do you want to have happy bees this year? Do you want to have cranky bees like
I do not want to have cranky bees.
2020 was not a good year for bees. They were very cranky.
They were part of my plan for avoiding that, and I don't know this is gonna work, but it seems to. I intend to split everybody early, because basically just splitting seemed to solve the problems. I kept the mean queens. The two of them are in a double nuke and they're fine. Those two colonies are very gentle. They're Russian, so I don't know if they're gentle, but they're not crazy aggressive.
Everybody gives Russians a bad name.
I know, and I just can't get away from that. Seems to be my experience with them, is they're a little feisty, but I don't think they're any worse than I have singing cedars, that nuke. They're not really any less feisty. So
I think for some reason it was 2020. Honestly, we've just got to get through this year, because you're not the only one. I had 4 or 5 other people that I went in and took bees away from them. I brought them home. Yeah, Nance, I brought them home, put them into different nukes or different bee yards, and a couple of them stayed cranky still, but on the most part, they learned that they couldn't do that and they all got along. And this is what we need to do in 2020 and 2021 is everybody needs to get along, and we all need to grow together and to do the kumbaya. No, I'm just saying, like we just need to, watch our bees, not get too big, and, go from there. So Dale, how many hives right now?
I currently have 7 colonies,
okay.
210 frame colonies, 3 8-frames, and a double nuke with a colony in each
So you got a good selection of things that you can pull from.
Yeah.
And what do you want to have in 2021?
That seems to be fair. It was pushing it this year, but I think that's a comfortable spot for me. I'm still I'm still expanding. I do want to get into making my own queens next year. So I haven't built it yet, but I'm doing a three section mating nuke. And I intend to order a bunch of nukes, and that's what I'm going to put my splits in. And
when you're saying you're going to order nukes, you're ordering the woodenware, not the nukes of bees.
The woodenware, yep.
Right.
And I actually, if everybody makes, I'm ordering a nuke, or not a nuke, a package for backup, just in case everybody dies.
And they won't.
I don't think so, but hedging my bets.
Yeah.
That's how I got into the tomato situation I'm in now.
But that's not really tomatoes. I mean, like you are managing, you can make piccalilli and you can make tomato sauce, and you're okay. You're able to take care of that. It's just when you do get too large too quick, that's when it can feel overwhelming, and it's not so much fun anymore. It's more of a job, which we don't want beekeeping to be like that. Beekeeping should be something that we enjoy and not have bees chasing us down the road.
They definitely, they do that. I like to say they stole a good portion of my summer for me, because I could not. And then somebody mentioned that they can recognize faces, and so it wasn't in my head that they were after me. It wasn't anybody else. It was me.
Yeah. Does Dale look like a bear? Kinda. No. He's a teddy bear. So, but anyway, I'm glad that you're, like what I hear from you guys, all of the people that we've had a chance to talk to today, is that you are planning to the future. You are going to have additional equipment, which is always important. And my suggestion is try to have some nukes. Even if you have full boxes, you can always put dividers in them and make them into 2 ways or 3 ways or 4 ways. You don't have to buy new equipment all the time. You can adjust them so that you have the ability to use the equipment that you have, but you can make more space for queen rearing. If you wanted to do even walkaways, you could put, if you have a 3-way split, you can put 2 frames. That means like 6 frames in each of those, or whatever you need to put in, and you walk away and voila, you have a queen already. Like, it's not maybe the best way to go. You can raise your own queens, by doing grafting and things like that. And we can talk about that in the future. But there's things that you can do that aren't expensive, and they're great backups, and we can be sustainable beekeepers where we don't have to buy stuff all the time. So, like if you have 5 or 6 hives, honestly, the chances of losing all of those is pretty small. If you only have 1 or 2 hives, the chances are a little bit higher. And if you listen to Michael Palmer, like that's what he teaches, is why he does double nukes and things like that, is because you're increasing your chances of having your bees make it through the winter. So there's a lot of good ideas out there. Just know that you need to keep listening and then decide what is going to work best for you. So I thank all of you guys today for sharing all of your experiences. And I'm looking forward to 2021. I think you guys are all looking forward to 2021 too, because we have been through a lot this year. And Joanna, we all encourage you to get started, and look forward to hearing more from you on your journey as a first-year beekeeper. Yeah, so thank you guys very, very much today. I think what we'll talk about at one of our next ones is we'll talk a little bit more about Slovenian beekeeping and what Slovenian bee houses are, because we can do that in the winter. I can actually open up some of those frames, possibly if we have a warmer day, and you can see a little bit about what's going on. And they're in a bee house, so it's much warmer in that bee house than it is outside. We'll have to just wait and see, but there's a lot of other topics that we can talk about, and we'll talk about more in January and February, and then March we're going to get started again. So there's a lot to do in preparation for the next year, and I really encourage you guys to research and be prepared. So thanks for joining us today.